Welcome, everyone. I am Denise Hancock of Astrology with Denise, and I am delighted that you are here today to talk about your 2025 roadmap with me. It's really set up to be a very exciting year astrologically, which usually means we are also going to have a very exciting year here on Earth. And so hopefully what I have to share with you today will help you to feel a little more prepared. So I wanted to start off with just a few disclosures and some guidelines here. What I am going to talk about today describes our collective global experience based on planetary cycles. Everything from 250-year cycles or longer to 28-day lunar cycles, but it has to do with the experience of the world as a whole, what we call mundane astrology. And so while you and I are part of this shared collective, this is not an individual or personalized forecast for you. And I want to tell you that in every single year, some people will have wonderful achievements and great experiences and lots of love and joy. Some people will have heartache and trauma. And so I don't want you to take any of what I'm saying today to be personally like frightening or worrisome or a promise. It is, like I said, for the collective as a whole. And so your own experience will fall somewhere within that. If you want a detailed personal forecast, I'm happy to do that, but it is a service that you would have to purchase and schedule through my website. And then, as I've already talked about, this webinar is being recorded, and it is my plan to send all of you access to the recording, as well as some other folks who have purchased it but weren't able to be here. And I also do plan to offer the recording for sale to others. So I'm going to hold questions and answers until the end of the session. That way, it's easy to edit those out. And if I haven't already said it, my website is astrologywithdenise.com, and I am Denise Hancock. Okay, so before we get really into the astrology and the events of 2025, I want to zoom us out a little bit into a wider lens. It helps to actually think about where we are in terms of bigger cycles to know how to interpret what is going on this year. And I promise I'm not going to use much astrology language at all, but I know some of you are interested, and so I'm labeling these bigger cycles so you know where it's coming from. So last year, I put together kind of an 8 to 10 year forecast, and a lot of what's going on this year in 2025 is really related to a cycle that started in the 1960s, right before my birth. And in the 1960s, the planet Pluto and the planet Uranus came together in the sign of Virgo. And, if you've ever taken US history or world history, you know that what happened in the 1960s was really revolutionary. At the time, the Vietnam War was raging, and really for the first time in US history, young people rose up and protested the war. And there was actually a saying about don't trust anyone over 30. And so there were a lot of rebellions against the structures and the establishments, along with many, many seeds planted for radical change. The civil rights movement, the gender rights movement, the sexual revolution, lots of political changes, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And so that started a cycle that we're actually going to be in for several hundred years, and we're still in the early stages of this cycle. We are now at what's called the trine, which is a complementary, cooperative, supportive aspect between Uranus and Pluto. And what that does is it actually removes barriers so that things can happen very quickly. And so I see this time period then as actually speeding up and making rebellion and revolution and radical change easy. And so over the next 8 years, I think we'll see fundamental shifts in all of our consciousness, as well as some spiritual awakenings and complete changes in the paradigm of how we see the world. So bringing that down a little bit closer to focus, this particular year and next year is heavily flavored by two other planets coming together. Saturn, which is a planet that's very much about material reality, aging, maturity, responsibility, restrictions, and limitations. And it is conjoining or blending with the planet Neptune, which is all about big vision, imagination, creativity, spirituality, compassion, and like universal consciousness. The last time these two planets came together was in 1988 and 89. And so, in some ways, what's happening this year and next is ending a cycle that started in 1989. You can actually go back in history and track these cycles. And what tends to happen when Saturn and Neptune come together is that there is a fall and then a new rise of ideals and ideologies with lots of revelations and disclosures, so that in general, we, kind of the common people, start to see the truth of what's going on in our world. Along with that, there's many times events that are an uptick in natural disasters, diseases, poisoning, and pollution, because it's like structures are being torn down so things are allowed to spread. And so with that, then comes this outpouring at the collective level of grief and loss, and oftentimes disillusionment that, we realize no one's coming to save us, and that the things we thought we could take for granted are not there. But that is followed then by compassion and aid and help. And so what you tend to see is this loss of faith that slowly then turns into a renewal of faith. The other really exciting thing about this period, because I know what I just explained isn't terribly exciting, is that there tends to be lots of new visions for the future and new forms of arts and new forms of culture, music, fashion, design, film, etc. Now, my friend Colin Bedell recently, he's an astrologer who goes by Queer Cosmos is his name. He wrote a wonderful article recently based on the 1989 Saturn and Neptune conjunction. And in fact, there is a whole National Geographic documentary about the year 1989. So if you have time on over the holidays, you might look at it, because it turns out it was much more of a turning point in our world than I really even thought about. I was a young adult then, and it was actually the year that I left my husband with a baby. But what was going on in the world that some of you may remember, and others of you are too young, is it really was the unexpected fall of the Berlin Wall, which suddenly reunited Germany on the east and west sides. There was lots of sort of leadership changes and border changes that year. It was also the year that in Central Park, a woman was murdered while jogging, and President Trump at that time was a businessman in New York who took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty for these 5 young men who were accused of the murder, 5 young Black men. As it later turned out, they were completely acquitted. But one of the things we saw in 1989 was this rise of sensationalism in the media, that the media began to sort of report less based on objective facts, but more like when it bleeds, it leads. We also saw for the first time where films like The Little Mermaid became this whole economic market. And so films became no longer popular or funded unless they could also produce this whole line of products and action figures and t-shirts and those kinds of things. So there were a lot of big things that happened in 1989 that really set us up for this whole cycle that we've been in. And what's happening is that particular cycle's come to an end and a new one is beginning. Now, just to give you a little bit of a flash forward, Saturn is often called Chronos, or the timekeeper. And so the next few years, Saturn's moves are actually going to push us further into this Uranus trine Pluto timeline. And so what we can expect probably in the years 28, 29, but these are things that sort of slowly build and slowly move away. So in some ways, we're already seeing this, is as Saturn squares Pluto, there will be a backlash to these revolutionary and radical new ideas, which often turns out to be authoritarianism and repression. Many economists, as well as astrologers, are calling for an economic recession, 2027, 2028, 2029, with possibly a depression and decline in the housing market. Continuing to have diseases and disasters, no big surprise with climate change. And then what comes next is, I think, a little bit more exciting. In 2031 and 2033, as Saturn gets closer to that planet Uranus, who is all about revolution, radical change, liberation, we then see this collision of the old and new, where we have an increased uptick in radicalization and revolution, along with more disruptive new technologies. And at that time, we usually have changes in individual rights and freedoms that kind of become law or legislation. It's like they work themselves into our system to be embedded. And so I hope that that gives you some hope that the things we do now and next year lead us to creating potentially new social, new political ideals that really start to take form later on in 2031, 32, and 33. So what does that mean for 2025? Well, there's three overarching themes that I want you to keep in mind as I take you then quarter by quarter and month by month. I hear people complain about the pace of change and all the integration of technology that we've really had in our lives since the early 1990s. And I hate to tell you this, but it's not slowing down. It's actually probably only going to speed up as artificial intelligence has kind of entered the mainstream. Smartphones have become a way of life. It is possible that there are disruptions and kind of steps backward, but overall, the pace of change in our lives is only going to continue moving faster and faster. And so one of the ways I want you to think about that personally is, in my parents' generation, it was really believed that people who had stability and constancy, where they committed to something and they stayed with that company or with that job long term, that they had the advantage. I don't think that's true in the future. I think that for yourself, you, and for me, the best thing that you can cultivate is a broad skill set where you can be flexible and adaptable to the changes in the markets that are coming. We are likely to see in 2025, and I know that this won't surprise you based on the incoming administration and what they've said they want to do, a real dissolution of long-standing structures and systems that we have come to rely upon, whether that be something like the Department of Education, a Medicaid program, literal physical buildings. I think there's going to be a lot of tumult happening, and I'm already seeing people preparing for that, particularly in the education, the healthcare sector, any of the nonprofits. They're all thinking about what turmoil may be coming in 2025 they need to prepare for. Yet there's hope, right? We also have the ability to create new forms and new movements and new ideas. And, based on what we will or won't accept as people and what our visions are for the future, we start planting seeds. And some of these seeds are rooted in those 1960s revolutions. It also is rooted way back in the 1890s in another long-term cycle where we really started this process of technological revolution that was going to dramatically change our lives all around the world. So those are the three big themes. Change gets faster, structures and systems dissolve, and we are able to create some new forms and new movements. But I think this is almost like a collective brainstorming period. We're going to have lots of ideas and ideals bubble up. Not all of them will be keepers. And so in many ways, it's a really sort of creative stew of us sort of deciding together what are the things that we care about the most that are going to lead us into the future. So I have a couple of slides that I'm going to say 2 minutes of Astro Talk. And this is for my astrology curious or junkie people in the audience. So one of the reasons that I see 2025 as a really remarkable year is we have lots of big, rare astrological movement happening. The chart that I put on the screen here is actually for the summer solstice, which is June 21st in New Orleans. And that is the date when the sun enters Cancer. And the reason I chose this chart is because most of these changes have taken place by summer. So the nodes of the moon are shifting in January. They've been in Aries and Libra for the last year and a half. They're going to be moving into Pisces and Virgo. And that impacts where we have eclipses and where we get sort of new influxes of energy in the collective and in our lives. We have several outer planets that are all changing signs. Saturn takes, 2.5 years to go through a zodiac sign. It's changing signs in the spring. Uranus can be in a zodiac sign for 8 to 12 years. It's changing signs in July. Neptune can be in a sign for a much longer time. It's changing signs at the end of March. We already had Pluto change signs in 2024. So it's like setting us up for a completely new paradigm, new sets of circumstances. I've already talked about the Uranus trine Pluto, and we're also going to have an important aspect of Jupiter being in square with Saturn and Neptune, which we actually have tomorrow and we had in August, and it's going to happen one more time in June. So these are some big astrology things that really help shape the year, and you'll see kind of these themes through my interpretations. And that's it for the astrology for the moment. So let's go into a strategic overview by quarter. The first quarter of the year, I would kind of say it starts off as a 2024 hangover. There are many things that came into play late summer of this year, August and September, where we're kind of stuck. We're revisiting old patterns, we're retreading old territory, and that really doesn't end until we start to get into the second quarter. So in this first quarter, it's not a fantastic time for launching brand new projects. Now, if it's something you've already been working on, that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, I think a lot of the first quarter is kind of a wait and see what happens, how things play out that are already in motion before you make big changes. And I'm hearing a lot of that with people's planning and with their purchasing decisions because they're sort of waiting to see what happens. So how can you deal with that? I mean, for me, the biggest thing you can do is to focus on what is necessary and take care of yourself and the people you love. And so I would say the first quarter is really a restoration time. We can't control the turmoil of the decisions that are being made and what's going to impact us on the outside, but we can find peace and harmony within ourselves, within our home, and within our communities. So my suggestion is that you focus on doing what is necessary, following your existing plans, and just really have patience for the process in the first quarter. For January specifically, we have a situation where like our will, our drive, and our assertiveness is kind of been derailed and directed towards things that are more about the past, about home and family, about comfort and nurturance. And so January is a really good time, and this will actually lead into February as well, for diving into any long-standing projects or problems that you have maybe set aside that are going to require a substantial effort. And I would say you want to do things that are within your power to control. You can't count on like a lot of outside help, contractors, leaders, etc., necessarily for support, but instead think about what you can manage within your own zone of care. January and February are really great times to do any research projects, to really dive into a topic or a problem and learn more about it. Any kind of investigations, like maybe looking at your options. It's also really great energy for redoing things, revising things, renovating things. I would say be mindful of interpersonal conflicts because they can intensify pretty quickly. In general, people may be feeling a little bit vulnerable, a little bit defensive, and a little bit frustrated. So the more you can sort of work on things that are within your control that take a whole lot of like hard work and effort, I think the happier you'll be. January 4th is a nice day to just sort of take a break, especially if you start off strong at the new year and maybe, I don't know, clean out your office, clean out files. Then on January, we have some really nice astrology, which is great for like stopping and celebrating or hanging out with friends or going to lunch. As we move towards the end of the lunar cycle, January 27th and 31st, those are days that I like to mark on my calendar as sort of rest and recalibration days. Because when the moon cycle is closing and we're getting towards a new moon, the sky is dark, like there's sort of a hibernation, again, a quieting, a closing down. And one of the things I did put in your Paper Bell Portals today is a list of all the new and full moons for the year. And so you'll see that the 3 or 4 days before each new moon, I have marked these with the turtle as kind of like, go slow these days. Take care of yourself. Try to wind things up if you can. Moving into the month of February, again, I would say this is a month for a slow pace, that there may be confusion, misdirection, and flux. We'll have a new administration taking shape. There'll be a lot of people probably changing jobs around this time of year. And so try to approach February and your activities with kind of like creativity and curiosity and a playfulness, like thinking about, well, what if this and what if that? Or, keeping in mind that opportunities may pop open because of all this flux that's happening. In many ways, uncertainty is freedom. Like when you don't know exactly what the future is going to hold or who's going to be where, there's a certain freedom in that if you can stay open to possibility and not be like so tightly hanging on to certainty. I suggest that you just brainstorm possibilities, you stay open, but try not necessarily to commit to any medium to long-term plans. February 4th, 1st is actually a lovely day where I believe that's a Friday night. And I would encourage you to, plan something fun that night. Whether it is literally a date night or imagination. For those of you in the New Orleans area, it's a wonderful time for a costume party. Um, February 9th through 11th is a time when I would say pay attention to any messages or insights you get. There may be some clarity there, some reality checks come through where you sort of get a sense of what's going to unfold. And then those days for rest and recalibration are February 25th through the 28th. Moving into March. March is a strange month. Astrologically, there's a lot of tumultuous things, and no doubt it's going to also be weird, unsettled in our own lives. And I would say of all of the months in 2025, March is kind of the one where I'm like, I don't know, anything could happen. And so I am planning to sort of keep my schedule light, to not commit to a lot of things, and really treat March as a wait and see month. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to have a set of eclipses, March 14th and 29th, that kind of mirror eclipses that we had in October of last year. There will also be not one, not two, but, well, 2 planetary retrogrades. And so I would expect in March a lot of sort of plot twists, side quests, and rehashes where what you thought was settled, you find isn't. It may be things coming up from the past. It may be sudden changes that put you on a new direction. But so wait and see, keep low profile. That's my best advice. Some specific dates to take note of are March 3rd through 9th. I would use that week to really just sort of make sure all of your communications, your systems, your files are in order. There is a Mercury retrograde coming, and so I would use this time to back up my files. If I've got something like flight plans or reservations, I would print copies of that so that I know that it's available for me. There are several dates where I have this X, March 11th and 12th, the 16th and 17th, the 25th, 26th, 27th, and 30th, where we have these very unusual periods where as the moon moves, the moon is essentially not making any conversations or relationships with any other planets. These are known in astrology as void moon periods. It's very unusual to have periods of more than 48 hours when the moon makes no contacts. And so the advice for this time is to kind of like be Teflon, just like let things slide off of you. Know that whatever drama or turmoil comes up in these time periods, it's probably going to just go away on its own. These are not good times to take actions unless you specifically have a goal to be kind of sneaky and under the radar. So it could potentially be a good time to file your taxes, right? Because you just want that to go on through with nobody looking at it. It could be a time to maybe get a policy changed or try to accomplish something where if people noticed, they might try to stop you. But if they're busy with other things, they won't. So under the radar action for those dates. On March 15th, I would just say that's a great date to connect with your people, your friends, your colleagues. Just check in with people. It's a great like social connection sort of day. And then the rest and recalibrate dates for March are the 27th through the 30th. And particularly on the 27th and 28th, it's a really great time to just sort of Netflix and chill. You may feel very tired, and it would be a really great time to escape into something like a fantasy series or something that sort of gets your mind off the affairs of the world and puts you in a mindset that is much more, fun and beautiful and visionary. And I think that would help restore you after such a crazy month. So then we get to the second quarter. And here I would say the new year of 2025 begins in earnest. After the craziness of the eclipses and all of the retrogrades, we're now going to see planets start shifting forward. And I think things will start moving quickly and many more avenues and options will open up for you. So second quarter is really the time to say ready, set, go. And I would say this is actually true, particularly from late March to probably the end of August, are kind of our best opportunities to launch things into the world, to start new projects, to make huge, big new changes. So month by month. In April, I would say you want to use the first half of the month to do what I call environmental scanning. Okay, things have changed since the first of the year. Where are we now? What are the opportunities we have? What are the resources we have? Take inventory and explore creative and collaborative possibilities. Start dreaming big with like members of your team, your colleagues, your personal board of directors. Given this landscape we have now, like what is the best, biggest possible thing we can do with it? Once we get to mid-April, I think your go power is really going to return. This is the energy we've been waiting for, so you can course correct and just start plunging forward. A really lovely day that aligns with festival season is April 17th. And so I would encourage you to plan something fun for yourself and maybe your best friends. It just has some like nice kind of pleasant vibes. Where I think you'll feel like maybe being outside, being in the sunshine, dancing, moving, etc., etc. When we get to the end of April, the 23rd to the 27th is a time I would say you would like to lie low and to rest and recalibrate. However, there are some astrology patterns that may make that very difficult. Where there may be an increase in drama and conflict and tension. So again, I would try to lighten your calendar for that end of the month. Now, it could be really good for something that you're doing that like requires a lot of physical effort. When Mars gets involved with Pluto, which it is, it's like if you're going to clean out a barn, if you're going to clean out a closet, if you're going to dig yourself a garden, if you're going to do something that requires lots of like sweaty labor, then those late dates in April could be really good for that. Moving into May, again, more options open up. Situations start moving and we start seeing that progress is possible. And the urge to act just grows stronger and stronger. And I think the pace picks up in May. On May 23rd, that is a date that I really liked as kind of a spicy, active pleasure zone. If you're dating or you're in relationship with somebody, it could be a really hot date night. It could also be fun for things like dancing or moving or going to a workout. But there's like some spicy aspects between Venus, the feminine principle, and Mars, the masculine, which can just make for a really good time. Then after that, take a few days to rest and recalibrate before the new moon. And then at the end of May is a day on May 29th to just really pay attention to news and messages and insights because you may get some clarity on that day. The month of June, the last month of the second quarter. June is interesting. I mentioned earlier that we have a Jupiter square Saturn that's happening tomorrow, and that is actually re-emerging for the third and final time in early June. And so as that happens, you may find that there are conflicts over territory or resources. It may not impact you. You may only see that play out at the state level. I know a lot of states have fiscal year ends at June 30th. It may be playing out at like the federal level or on the world level, but it's a time when there's like this impulse of the collective to fight over resources, to defend and to protect. This is mine, that is theirs. It's kind of a very us versus them energy. And so I feel like our challenge as a whole is to pursue security and justice for ourselves while also trying to remain open-hearted and compassionate towards other people, to sort of avoid falling into that conflictive, combative us versus them mentality. In June, we also have some really strong start stuff energy. Just again, choose your projects and your battles wisely. Friday night, June 6th, I really like as a fun date to put on your calendar. It would be a wonderful time to do something that requires like movement or thinking. And so I think like game night, conversations, music, dancing, social chit chat, it has that kind of vibe. Then June 11th through 19th is when those roadblocks or those speed bumps appear, where people may be not wanting to let go of things, not wanting to share, being extra defensive and vulnerable. Be patient with that. It does get better. The end of the month before the next new moon is June 22nd through the 25th. And I think it would be wise at that time to give yourself time and space to reflect on your hopes, your dreams, and your guiding values, to really count your blessings. You know, what do we have? What are our resources? What are we super thankful for? And share that gratitude with other people as a way, you know, to reach out. There's a wonderful book I love called Gratitude by Diana Butler Bass. And she talks about how gratitude as a way of life changes the whole paradigm of how you see the world. When you realize that everything we have is really supportive of us, and when thankfulness becomes an everyday practice and a way of approaching the world at large, it can really change you. I have another 2 minutes of astro talk for you because I told you that Jupiter in June is forming a square aspect, a 90-degree aspect to Saturn in Aries and also Neptune in Aries. And this particular square, a square is a sign of tension where things are uncomfortable. They're not seeing each other's perspectives clearly. There's almost like a battle of wills here. And Jupiter is a planet that really wants to say yes. It wants growth, it wants expansion, it wants optimism, it wants abundance. And Jupiter in Cancer is very caring about the people in its circle, right? And so it's like, I'm taking care of my community, I'm taking care of my home, I'm taking care of my children and my loved ones and my traditions. Whereas Saturn and Neptune in Aries are much more focused on I want, I am, I will. And kind of have this warrior archetype, this I'm going to do what I want no matter what anyone else thinks about it. And so, as you think about what kind of projects or what kind of work, what kind of direction your life might take at this time, I think it's worth being aware of, there's got to be, on one hand, a balance between like what is best for me and my family while we're still holding other people in compassion. There's a real risk here for butting heads, for conflicts, for defensiveness. And so I just thought that was worth putting in mind. Now, the good thing is after June, what happens is Jupiter starts to move away from this. And so I feel like the latter part of the year gives us a little bit more of this positive Jupiter energy of perhaps feeling more optimistic, feeling more growth oriented, and making some progress. The height of this conflict is really right around mid-June. And that's enough astro talk for the moment. So now we're getting to the third quarter. I already told you things started speeding up in the second quarter. I think the third quarter is even faster. The volume and the speed of messages, of thoughts, of ideas, of turbulence can almost be overwhelming. And so I feel like one of our jobs as people who, work with others, as teachers, as colleagues, as healthcare workers, as helpers, is to really regulate our own nervous system, pay attention to our own body's needs, so that then we can be present and we can teach and we can set good examples for other people. And so as I think about what I'm going to do myself in the year 2025, I feel like a lot of my work needs to be centered around how can I help people to take care of themselves and their communities in ways that are healthy and promote well-being for everyone. Because I think we all may be feeling a little bit frazzled by the time we get into the third quarter of 2025. Some of us are already feeling that now. And so I hope you're able to enjoy some holiday relaxation time. So what happens in July? There's several things that make me think that in the first couple of weeks, our attention is going to be drawn to the notion of material resources and needs, whether that's literally having to do with climate change and what's going on in our earth, whether it has to do with our bodies and the things that are going into our bodies, our food chain, our agriculture, or it could also be financial investments. But I feel like there's going to be something in those first couple of weeks that make us really think about the earth, our bodies, and the resources that we need to take care of ourselves and the earth. The pace of change, like I said, really quickens here, stimulating communication, stimulating nervous systems. It may be that it feels almost frantic, like, oh my gosh, what have we done? What can we do about this? We are getting ready to head back into a Mercury retrograde period, and so I flagged the dates of July 11th through the 15th for times to really clean out your systems, back up things, print things, make sure that your communications and your technology are in good working order. Before the new moon, the dates to rest and recalibrate are July 22nd and 23rd. And right after that new moon, there's like this intense likelihood of, again, it's sort of Mars related, of there could be protests, there could be people that are outspoken, there could be conflicts, there could be clashes, there could be strikes, like that kind of activity. It also could truly be wildfires, right? There's something very hot and very activating that's happened in late July, but then it's followed by a couple of cooler, nicer things, which make me think it could be resolved, it could be solved, that there could be a peace negotiation. And so I would think at the end of July that the go-to action there is really to listen to people, to hear what their fears are, what their anxieties are, what their concerns are, and address it and speak really from the heart, that there needs to be like a vulnerability and an openness here in order for us to solve problems. August. Well, August is nothing like March. I said March was really crazy in terms of the astrology activity. However, when I look at, in general, what's happening in the first 10 days of August, I would say it's not likely to be a very productive time to be at work. It sort of looks like roadblocks and arguments, and again, this kind of hot and dry and unhappy energy. And so my plan and my suggestion for you is just protect your sanity. Can you take off work? Can you just get out of town? Or if you have to be working and you have to be kind of in your daily mode, like earlier in the year, focus on your own stuff. Focus on the things you can control. Don't be expecting lots of cooperation and lots of big yeses or approvals at this time. So do what you can with your own stuff. It's another great time to really review your work, to update things, to revise things. If you have things that need to be fixed, repaired, restored, that's a good use of that early August energy. This is kind of like the highest potential for conflict and just aggravation between August the 7th and the 10th. And so I'm just letting you know this is your choice. Maybe you're a person who decides to lay low on these days, or maybe you're a person who really needs somebody to pay attention to what's going on, and what you want to do is jump in the fray. And that's okay too, because there's a time for conflict and there's a time for confrontation. And so it absolutely can be productive at times. Then luckily on August the 11th, it's like we get something sweet. We get something that can be peaceful and healing. And so whatever aggravation has gone on in the first 10 days of August, there's like a little nice connection on the 11th that can kind of make things better and ease our, troubles. August 21st through 23rd are like good days to rest and reflect before the next new moon. And then I would say towards the end of August on the 26th, we kind of get some mental help from the planet Uranus, which might really bring us some fresh ideas, some creative solutions. I know we're looking at like the start of the school year if you're a teacher or you have children. And so maybe there's something there about some excitement building or some ideas to do something different. Maybe it's you literally buy yourself 6 pairs of fresh socks in a color you wouldn't normally wear. But doing something that's a little out of the box, I think will really kind of be a great end to the month of August. September, we get back to eclipse season. So in March, we had 2 eclipses, and we have 2 more in the month of September. And so again, I would say it's a little bit of a wait and see vibe. Now, I will say September does not have nearly the other kinds of strange and dramatic planetary activity that March did. But for some people, it will still be a month that has some crisis or some emphasis. So be prepared for plot twists in September. Your priorities may have to change based on the information you get, messages or news stories. Things that you thought were handled, that you thought were resolved, or they'd gone away, they may resurface and really demand your attention. And so September is kind of a month of crisis and consolidation. On September 13th and 14th, I would pay close attention to any messages or insights or news that you receive. That could be really important for you. September 19th through the 21st is a rest and recalibration time. And really the whole month of September and any time in eclipse season, you may just find that you're feeling extra tired. And so anything you can do to sort of shore up your sleep schedule, make sure you have healthy foods, do good self-care at that time, and give yourself plenty of time that's downtime for rest. I think that would be really good. And then towards the end of the month, September 23rd through 25th, I think you'll get a renewed sense of strength and focus so that you're now ready to take on any of these issues that have returned, any new challenges, and go forward. That brings us to the 4th quarter of the year. So we've had this from March through September, a really active, busy time, a time for lots of new projects, lots of changes. Maybe there are things you started, maybe there are things other people started that impact you. When we get into the 4th quarter, it's like we take a few steps back. And so progress might be stalled or sidetracked. And so it's really a time to focus on today, focus on what you can do right now. As a nurse, I used to make myself a list taking care of patients about what are the most important and what are the most urgent things I must do today, and then letting the other things slide. And so that's a better use of your time than to worry about what's going to happen in the future. Again, I really think it's a year when we're going to need to invest time and energy in our family, chosen family or biological, and our communities. And this will be a time, I think, in the fourth quarter to really sort of take in and reflect on what so far happened this year and, do healing work and sort of foundational planning in terms of, do I have the resources I need? Am I spending my time on the things that are important to me? Moving into October, this is just after the eclipses. And so there are still big changes at work. But I think in the month of October that you may find just some nice spots of ease, or you also may find that things just suddenly moved in ways that you weren't anticipating. October the 11th through the 13th were a couple of dates that I don't like very much in terms of just relationship connections. The planet Venus, who's all about love and beauty and desire and connection, she faces some challenges on that days. And so it may be that the things you thought you were going to do for fun or for beauty or for pleasure just are somehow blocked. It could also be that there's just some unusual, like you're not getting along with people for some well. So, just flag that as potential red flag on those days. October 19th through the 21st would be the time I'd say mark for rest and recalibration. Now, I live in New Orleans on the Gulf Coast, where this time of year is ripe for hurricanes. And so I just want to say my concern here is probably biased because of my own experiences and where I live geographically. But when I look at what's happening in the skies with the movement of the planets, kind of from late October to mid-December, many, many planets are going to be in water signs: Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. And that often can mean that there's an increased emphasis on things like the ocean, water, rain, things like pharmaceutical drugs and things like oil, that there literally could be some kind of flooding or disaster that may only be on the emotional level, like there's just too much and we're overwhelmed, but it also could really be on the physical material level. And so I would say that in terms of weather risk, late October to even early to mid-December, be alert for potential severe weather. Make sure that if you're on the Gulf Coast like me, or even I guess these days, it could be almost anywhere, maybe even in the Northeast, that you have emergency plans in place in case there are severe weather, which could also be things like spills or issues around contamination and spread. One of the things you saw earlier in here is that there is an increased possibility of pandemics, diseases, spreads, and of course we're seeing that in reports from the CDC, et cetera. So have safety on your mind as we go into the fourth quarter. In November, again, because of all this water in the sky, emotions will run really strong. And there's also a lot of fire energy, which can make people act impulsively. And so I would say in November, we really want to slow ourselves down and make sure we fact check things before we act. It's a time to really reflect and introspect, take stock of your big picture. And I already talked about this a little bit, a time to really reassess what matters. Your time and your money, are using it how you want to. We're going to have another Mercury retrograde, our third and final one of the year. So November 13th through 16th would be a great time to do all that backup and preparation stuff. And then November 17th through 20th, rest and recalibrate. The days around the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States look kind of sobering. And so there may be something to do with news around senior citizens or aging, potentially something with Social Security or Medicare, or maybe the markets themselves are having some difficulty. Some of the financial and economic forecasts that I've read are mixed for the year, that it should be overall positive year, but definitely some negative times. So I would say that time around Thanksgiving, really check in on the elders in your life and reality and kind of see what people need. December's a little bit of a balancing act. The retrograde is over, but it seems like there are lots of planets, the fast-moving planets, that are making hard contact with that Saturn and Neptune I talked about before. And so it gives me a sense that there may be bad news. Like I said, it might be bad economic news, bad political news, but I think our overall challenge in December is, how do we cultivate joy and gratitude and a sense of wonder and awe, even in the face of external difficulties. And I think we can really find comfort in our friends and our family and our community and our circle. The days I suggest rest and recalibration for are December 17th through 19th. And I actually think by the time we get to the holiday break, that there's some fortitude that comes in, that we're feeling like, okay, whatever all this bad news is, we can take care of each other, we can get through this. And so we head into holiday breaks with real strength and determination. So just kind of to review 2025 in the big picture, January and February are really kind of off to a slow start. With the Mars retrograde and other planetary patterns like the Jupiter and Saturn square, we are kind of stuck in patterns. So we're kind of still rehashing things that we've been working on since August and September, not really breaking any new ground. So it's not a great year for kicking off brand new New Year's resolutions. March is a real game changer for 2025. And again, I think we have to wait and see. It's a little unpredictable, but there will be big changes, plot twists, side quests, rehashes. It may be that people in leadership positions fall from power very suddenly, or that new leaders rise up. And that could be at the world level, not just state or national. April through August is really go time. There's lots of changes, things move really quickly, new paradigms, new challenges, and that's the best time of the year for new beginnings and new launches. And particularly for me, I'm looking for time periods after June, more like July and August. September is a month when we kind of tap the brakes. It's eclipse season again, which brings a little bit of turmoil and crisis, where again, there could be changes in leaders, changes in issues that require our attention. And then in the last quarter, October, November, and December, things kind of slow down and cool off, but we may be backtracking a little bit. And so our challenge is, despite whatever news is emerging that may look negative, that we need to maintain faith and have comfort and community with each other. So my overall goals for the year, and perhaps these would be useful for you too, are to really regulate my nervous system, to make sure that I'm doing practices like spending time outdoors and getting good sleep and enjoying my puppy and having good healthy food and getting good sleep that help me to show up and do my work. I'm going to try to embrace uncertainty as a space for growth, knowing that I don't have all the answers, you don't have all the answers, and frankly, no one has all the answers. But there will be opportunity. I want to make choices that are based on love and not fear. And I want to cultivate a sense of gratitude and generosity, sharing what I have and hoping and trusting that other people will share what they have when I have needs. And I really want to be a good member of community, to fortify my community and my resources so that I am prepared if we do in fact head into 27, 28, 29, a period of more difficult financial circumstances. I want to finish the presentation with what I thought was a really beautiful quote from a man named Pico Iyer, who he did a TED Talk several years ago and then wrote a book. And what he said was, in an age of acceleration, nothing can be more exhilarating than going slow. And in an age of distraction, nothing is so luxurious as paying attention. And in an age of constant movement, nothing is so urgent as sitting still. If you're interested in learning more about kind of how I've interpreted the astrology of the year, these are some resources for you, and you'll be able to return to them. Richard Tarnas was really a historian who did a wonderful job of looking at major planetary cycles and how they impact our big cultural, political, and social trends in the world. And in fact, some of his work has been turned into a lovely 10-part documentary series that you might enjoy called Changing of the Gods. There's also another book in a magazine here. And finally, I just want to remind you that what I've been talking about is the collective global experience. It is not your individual forecast. Your personal experiences, your family's experience can vary widely, right? You may have a wonderful year. You may get the break of your dreams. So please don't feel like you're somehow doomed. I don't think any of us are doomed, but I am a realist, and it looks like we are going into some tumultuous times where things are changing really fast, and as human beings, we're kind of struggling to keep up. If you'd like a more detailed personal forecast, I'd be happy to do that for you. You can book a service at my website, astrologywithdenise.com.